Hello chess friends and welcome to Azarov Chess channel and welcome to my Basics in Chess series. So in this series we're following opening principles, middle game strategies and the end game strategies. Today we'll talk about some middle game strategies again, but this thing that I wanted to show you today can happen to you also in an early stage of the game, and today's subject will be the so-called pawns collision in the center. So the pawn collision in the center is these types of setups in which you have maybe some dynamics in the center, and sometimes you don't know what to do. Which pawn should I take? Should I maybe leave it like this? Should I develop? Should I maybe attack the king? Should I maybe castle? Or what else should I do? So in the game, you see there are these common weak pawn positions that can happen to you. These are of course isolated pawns, double pawns, triple pawns, pawn islands, hanging pawns, and backward pawns. So in order to get a better middle game, you should avoid these types of positions. So maybe the hanging pawns and isolated pawns can be good in some occasions. I'll show you also when, but basically you should avoid to get isolated pawns or hanging pawns, or as I said, these other weak pawn positions. And if we see now these types of positions, which I've already prepared here for you, you shouldn't calculate other tactics than this particular tactics. What is happening if I trade off some pawns? So let's see now a possible continuation after something like d takes e5. So okay, we have taken a pawn and we're expecting maybe that that black will take d takes c4. We have now three isolated pawns. They can be of course fixed with b3 or f3, but so far these pawns are of course weakness. So here in the game, black can maybe try the move d4, and maybe you can attack the pawn with the move knight to f3, but maybe black can cement the pawn and black will have a very nice maybe supported pass pawn. So this could be maybe a bad position for us, as we have maybe this two double pawns here on the e file, and maybe black could be slightly better here. So that's why here you see it's necessary maybe to take the pawn with c takes d5. After c takes d5, we can take this pawn, and now maybe if black moves or takes the pawn, we could maybe trade off the queens and get a comfortable game, as we still can castle. So maybe there are even more possibilities. I just wanted to show you how you should think when you have pawn collisions, because in order to make something happen in the middle game, if you get a weak pawn in an early stage of the game, I think you have problems through the whole game. Even if you get something out of it, I think your opponent can simply play on that weaknesses, and you should really avoid these types of positions when you face pawn collisions. So in order to explain you this more, we have now our first example. It's a gameplay by Magnus Carlsen against Daniil Dubov. d4, d5 was played, c4, and here we have the common Tarrasch defense, and we have again a pawn collision. So what to do here? Which pawn should we trade? Which pawn should we not trade? So here, if we evaluate this dynamics, we should avoid, as I said, to create isolated pawns. So here Magnus played c takes d5, and there are now several choices here for black to play knight takes d5 after e4. Knight takes c3, and after b takes c3, maybe c takes d4, and c takes d4 would lead now into a position in which we have the pawn central control. So far these pawns are not a weakness, so we could maybe hang on to this position. But here after the move e takes d5, which Daniil Dubov played, here we have the move g3, and now in the game Daniil Dubov played simply knight to c6. So if we evaluate now this position, black is risking here to get an isolated pawn, because we can always play d takes c5, and black is continuing the game with an isolated pawn. So that's why you have to be careful in these dynamic positions where to go with your pawns. And here in the game, Magnus played a simply bishop to g2, developing c takes d4 was played, and now knight takes d4, and after bishop to c5, knight to b3, bishop to b6. I'm not going to explain now the whole game. I just wanted to show you how Magnus calculated this dynamics, what is the outcome of this pawn collision, and now we have a clear target. It's of course the weak pawn on d5. So here Dubov improved that pawn, but now knight to f4, we have castling, bishop to g5, rook to e8, and now rook to e1. We have h6, knight takes b6, a takes b, and now bishop takes c6. Very nice move by Magnus. And here after bishop takes f6, you see queen takes d4 was played, And now we have a new position in which, of course, white is a pawn up, but still we're facing some light score weaknesses, because these are, of course, clear targets for black. Magnus Carlsen won the game eventually, but that's not my point. I'm not going to show you now the whole game. My point was that after this dynamics position here, you see Magnus Carlsen created this position in which he has the opportunity to create an isolated pawn, and he simply played on that weakness. So let's see now another example. Here is a game played by Tigran Petrosian. Here c4. We are playing now a little bit faster. After move d4, we have now the move bishop to b4. Here c takes d5, e takes d5, and now bishop to g5. After h6, bishop to h4, and now again we have some dynamics in the game, c5. So most of us would calculate now what to do. Should I play e3? Should I play knight to f3? Should I maybe play rook to c1? But here in the game, if we first fix the pawn, we are waiting. Now black, what's he gonna do after castling? Now you see d takes c5. Again, we have created out of this dynamics an isolated pawn situation. Although here Petrosian opponent had some opportunities with the counter-attack. He played knight to d7, we have bishop to e2, queen to a5, and castling. Bishop takes c3, we have b takes c3, and after queen to c5, okay, we have now a new position in which both players have an isolated pawn, have a weakness, but still I like simply white's position more, because we have the bishop pair in an open game. We have still possibilities to improve the position with rook to c1, as Tigran Petrosian played, and we have now the opportunity to improve our pawn with the move c4 and really solve all of our positional problems. So as I said, when you face this dynamics like here after the move e3 and castling, don't calculate so much. Most of us would play something like bishop to d3 and would risk maybe a move like c4. Create this weakness, d takes c5, and now maybe it's really time to calculate everything, because now we have clear targets, and clear targets are very, very important in chess. You cannot just create tactics with some knight rook sacrifices, with some queen sacrifices. Basically, the tactics come out of this common ideas in chess. Now, as I said, we have this isolated pawn situation. So here, as I said, after rook to c1, here after move b6, you see c4 was played by Petrosian, and after bishop to b7, knight to d4, still with the opportunities, of course, after d takes c4 to include this rook into the game. And again, we have the bishop pair, we have a very nice centralized knight, we have a tempo on the queen, so this is really playable here for white, and also Tigran Petrosian won this game very, very easily. So as I said, when you face dynamics, watch always these possible outcomes. What are the outcomes? Am I risking to go into an isolated pawn, maybe into a backward pawn situation, into a hanging pawn situation, into double pawn situation? So you should really avoid to do that, and keep a calm game. If you create a weakness for your opponent, then play simply against that weakness, against this isolated pawn, maybe against a double pawn, against maybe a backward pawn. So that these are really clear targets, and it's very easy then to play on from that point. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you realize these ideas. These are very important things, because we'll now continue in our middle game strategies this common ideas to create isolated pawns, hanging pawns, backward pawns, and all of these weaknesses that can happen in the middle game. If you want to see more videos like this, you can also check out my other basics in chess videos from the series. Here's the link, and you can also watch my chess tactics and chess puzzles videos, in which I show you all of the possible tactical motifs that can happen to in a chess game. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thanks you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.